Now Troy had stooped beneath his matchless power, but flaming Phoebus kept the sacred tower. Thrice at the battlements Patroclus strook. His blazing aegis thrice Apollo shook. He tried the fourth, when bursting from the cloud a more than mortal voice was heard aloud. Patroclus, cease! This heaven-defended wall defies thy lance. Not fated yet to fall, thy friend, thy greater far, it shall withstand. Troy shall not stoop even to Achilles' hand. So spoke the god who darts celestial fires. The Greek obeys him, and with awe retires. While Hector, checking at the Scaean gates his panting coursers, in his breast debates, or in the field his forces to employ, or draw the troops within the walls of Troy. Thus, while he thought, beside him Phoebus stood, in Asius' shape, who reigned by Sangar's flood. Thy brother Hecuba, from Dymas sprung, a valiant warrior, haughty, bold, and young. Thus he accosts him. What a shameful sight! God, is it Hector that forbears the fight? Were thine my vigour, this successful spear should soon convince thee of so false a fear. Turn thee, turn thee to the field of fame, and in Patroclus' blood efface thy shame. Perhaps Apollo shall thy arms succeed, and heaven ordains him by thy lance to bleed. So spoke the inspiring god, then took his flight, and plunged amidst the tumult of the fight. He bids Cebrion drive the rapid car, the lash resounds, the coursers rush to war. The god, the Grecians' sinking souls depressed, and poured swift spirits through each Trojan breast. Patroclus lights, impatient for the fight, a spear his left, a stone employs his right. With all his nerves he drives it at the foe, pointed above, and rough and gross below. The falling ruin crushed Cebrion's head, the lawless offspring of King Priam's bed. His front, brows, eyes, one undistinguished wound. The bursting balls drop sightless to the ground. The charioteer, while yet he held the rein, struck from the car, falls headlong on the plain. To the dark shades the soul unwilling glides, while the proud victor thus his fall derides. Good heaven! What active feats yon artist shows! What skilful divers are our Phrygian foes! Mark with what ease they sink into the sand. Pity that all their practice is by land. Then rushing sudden on his prostrate prize, to spoil the carcass fierce Patroclus flies. Swift as a lion, terrible and bold, that sweeps the field, depopulates the fold, pierced through the dauntless heart, then tumbles slain, and from his fatal courage finds his bane. At once bold Hector, leaping from his car, defends the body and provokes the war. Thus for some slaughtered hind, with equal rage, two lordly rulers of the wood engage. Stung with fierce hunger, each the prey invades, and echoing roars rebellow through the shades. Stern Hector fastens on the warrior's head, and by the foot Patroclus drags the dead. While all around confusion, rage, and fright mix the contending hosts in mortal fight. So pent by hills, the wild winds roar aloud in the deep bosom of some gloomy wood. Leaves, arms, and trees aloft in air are blown, the broad oaks crackle, and the sylvans groan. This way and that the rattling thicket bends, and the whole forest in one crash descends. Not with less noise, with less tumultuous rage, in dreadful shock the mingled hosts engage. Darts showered on darts, now rounding the carcass ring, now round the carcass ring. Now flights of arrows bounding from the string. Stones follow stones, some clatter on the fields, some hard and heavy shake the sounding shields. But where the rising whirlwind clouds the plains, sunk in soft dust, the mighty chief remains, and stretched in death, forgets the guiding reins. Now, flaming from the zenith, Saul had driven his fervid orb through half the vault of heaven, while on each host with equal tempest flew the showering darts, and numbers sank to hell. But when his evening wheels o'erhung the main, glad conquest rested on the Grecian train. Then, from amidst the tumult and alarms, they draw the conquered course and radiant arms. Then rash Patroclus with new fury glows, and breathing slaughter pours amid the foes. Thrice on the press, like Mars himself, he flew, and thrice 3 heroes at each onset slew. There ends thy glory. There the fates untwine the last black remnant of so bright a line. Apollo dreadful stops thy middle way. Death calls, and heaven allows no longer day. For lo, the god in dusky clouds enshrined, approaching, dealt the staggering blow behind. The weighty shock his neck and shoulders feel, his eyes flash sparkles, his stunned senses reel in giddy darkness. Far to distance flung, his bounding helmet on the champaign rung. Achilles' plume is stained with dust and gore, that plume which never stooped to earth before, long used, untouched, in fighting fields to shine, and shade the temples of the mad divine. Jove dooms it now on Hector's helm to nod, not long, for fate pursues him and the god. His spear in shivers falls, his ample shield drops from his arm, his baldric strews the field, the corselet his astonished breast forsakes. Loose is each joint, each nerve with horror shakes. Stupid he stares, and all assistless stands, such is the force of more than mortal hands. A Dardan youth there was, well known to fame, from Panthus sprung, Euphorbus was his name, famed for the manage of the foaming horse, skilled in the dart, and matchless in the course. Full 20 nights he tumbled from the car, while yet he learned his rudiments of war. His venturous spear first drew the hero's gore, he struck, he wounded, but he durst no more, nor, though disarmed, Patroclus' fury stood, but swift withdrew the long pretended wood, and turned him short, and hurted in the crowd. Thus by an arm divine and mortal spear, wounded at once, Patroclus yields to fear, retires for succor to his social train, and flies the fate which heaven decreed in vain. Stern Hector, as the bleeding chief he views, breaks through the ranks, and his retreat pursues. The lance arrests him with a mortal wound, he falls, earth thunders, and his arms resound. With him all Greece was sunk. That moment all her yet surviving heroes seemed to fall. So, scorched with heat, along the desert score, the roaming lion meets a bristly boar. Fast by the spring, they both dispute the flood, with flaming eyes and jaws besmeared with blood. At length the sovereign savage wins the strife, and the torn boar resigns his thirst and life. Patroclus thus, so many chiefs o'erthrown, so many lives effused, expires his own. As dying now at Hector's feet he lies, he sternly views him, and triumphant cries, "Lie there, Patroclus, and with thee the joy thy pride once promised of subverting Troy, the fancied scenes of Ilion wrapped in flames, and thy soft pleasures served with captive dames. Unthinking man, I fought those towers to free, and guard that beauteous race from lords like thee. But thou a prey to vultures shall be made, thy own Achilles cannot lend thee aid, though much at parting that great chief might say, and must much enjoin thee this important day. Return not, my brave friend, perhaps he said, without the bloody arms of Hector dead. He spoke, Patroclus marched, and thus he sped. Supine and wildly gazing on the skies, with faint expiring breath the chief replies, Vain boaster, cease, and know the powers divine. Jove's and Apollo's is this deed, not thine. To heaven is owed whate'er your own you call, and heaven itself disarmed me ere my fall. Had 20 mortals, each thy match in might, opposed me fairly, they had sunk in fight. By fate and Phoebus was I first o'erthrown, Euphorbus next, the third mean part thy own. But thou, imperious, hear my latest breath. The gods inspire it, and it sounds thy death. Insulting man, thou shalt be soon as I. Black fate o'erhangs thee, and thy hour draws nigh. Even now on life's last verge I see thee stand, I see thee fall, and by Achilles' hand. He faints. The soul unwilling wings her way, the beauteous body left a load of clay, flits to the lone, uncomfortable coast, a naked wandering melancholy ghost. Then Hector pausing, as his eyes he fed on the pale carcass, thus addressed the dead. From whence this boding speech, the stern decree of death denounced, or why denounced to me? Why not as well Achilles' fate be given to Hector's lance? Who knows the will of heaven? Pensive he said, then pressing as he lay, his breathless bosom tore the lance away. And upward cast the course, the reeking spear he shakes, and charges the bold charioteer. But swift automaton with loosened reins, wrapped in the chariot o'er the distant plains, far from his rage the immortal coursers drove. The immortal coursers were the gift of Jove.